Hello and welcome to this short introduction to Identity and Access Management on Cloud Pak for Integration. My name is James Hewitt. I'm the Chief Architect for Cloud Pak for Integration, which we'll also be calling CP4I throughout this video. In this video, we'll cover the initial login, how to log into a CP4I system after it's been installed, how identities then get mapped to access controls across the platform, and what options we have for external identity management so that you can bring your own identities and use them within the CP4I platform. We'll start with how to log into a CP4I system once it's been installed. Typical CP4I installation involves installing the operators and then creating a platform UI or platform navigator CR in order to deploy the administration dashboard. So if I go into the ecosystem section here and select installed operators in my OpenShift cluster and scroll down to find my Cloud Pak for Integration operator, under the platform UI heading, you'll see I have one platform navigator installed. If I open that up, in here, you can see the location of the platform navigator, the platform UI, and that would take me straight into the user interface. But in order to do that, I'll need a password. The other thing just to mention while I'm here, once you've installed the platform navigator, up in the 9-dot switcher from OpenShift, we also add a link to the Cloud Pak directly in the console there to make it much easier to find. So if I want to get the password, I'm going to start by going into workload and selecting secrets. Because this is a cluster scoped installation, we're actually using the IBM Common Services namespace for running our identity system. So I'm going to go into there to find my password. And if I scroll down, you'll see an integration admin initial temporary credentials. And that's the initial password that gets generated on installation, so the system's nice and secure by default. If I scroll down, I'm just going to copy that password to my clipboard. And now I'm going to use the 9-dot switcher to load the user interface. The initial password is integration-admin. And I'm going to paste the password from the secret, and that'll load up the user interface for me. This is one of our demo clusters, so you can see that we already have a number of different instances installed. And down here you can see the names and where they are, and whether they're ready or not, and any other statuses that might be useful. If I go and look into the hamburger menu on the left-hand side, under administration, that's where we can do access control and where we can get back to the OpenShift console if we need to. On a Cloud Pak for Integration system, there are two identity and access management systems. One of them comes from the underlying Kubernetes platform, where you can create resources through the Kubernetes API server in the same way as you would create any other Kubernetes resources, and that's really useful for doing GitOps or other kind of pipelining to deploy systems. And the other one is the CP4I identity and access management system that you can access from the CP4I console. For users of the CP4I console, they don't necessarily need to have Kubernetes identities and vice versa. So the two systems work independently. The access control for Kubernetes is controlled using Kubernetes RBAC, and the access control within the CP4I user interface is controlled by the CP4I Identity and Access Management System, which is powered by Keycloak. The Identity and Access Management System within CP4I is hierarchical. You can assign users permissions on the top level CP4I installation, and that will then allow them to access all of the instances underneath. You can assign users access to a specific type of integration capability, such as App Connect, and they will then have permissions on all App Connect instances, or you can assign users permission directly on individual integration instances. To just demonstrate those different levels of permission, I'm going to open up the access control panel from the Cloud Pak for Integration installation. You'll see here that within Keycloak, we're in the realm called IBM Cloud Pak, and we are the integration administrator. If I now go and look at my users, these are the local users on the system. I'm going to, for this demo, create a new user, just called my user. And I'm going to go and set a password for that user. The next thing I'm going to do is go and look at role mappings and assign this user some roles. And I'm going to assign the user client roles. Within Keycloak, a client is any application that is connected to the identity and access management system. So the CP4I platform UI is one client, and every integration instance is another client, and there is also a Keycloak client itself for the realm management. I'm going to start by looking for the CP4I client ID for this particular installation. The top level client for a CP4I installation is always called integration, and it's followed by a random string to differentiate it from other clients. The admin role within that client will provide admin access to the whole platform and all instances installed on that platform. You'll then find a number of capability-specific roles that allow you to just provide admin access on specific capabilities. For example, down here, we could give dashboard admin to give people access to the App Connect dashboards installed on this cluster, or we could give them access to individual CRs, or we could go and find the messaging ones to give them access to specific MQ resources as well. What I'm going to do for this user is I'm going to find the viewer role, and I'm going to give them that role so that they can see everything on the cluster. And then I'm also going to give them dashboard admin so that they can do administration on dashboard items. Let's just assign those permissions and you'll see those come up in the list here. So the viewer role here will give access to view all resources across the platform. The dashboard admin role here will give access to administrate all ACE dashboards in the platform. And I'm now going to assign one more role to do with queue managers. I'm going to do a quick search for queue manager and you'll see that what I could do is I could pick a overall queue manager role and assign that as well. Or what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to say I want this user to also be a web admin of this specific queue manager that's listed here. That way we can give access to one MQ instance without needing to give access to all of them. And I can click assign, and now this user has all of those different permissions. The other thing that you can do with the Identity and Access Management System built into CP4I is go into groups, and you can manage those same sort of permissions through groups. So if I were to create a group called viewers, I could then go into that group and I could add my new user that I created. And I could map roles directly to the group. And I'm going to find the viewer role for the CP4 instance as a whole and assign that here. And those roles will merge with the roles directly associated with the user and be effective when the user logs in. So to demonstrate those roles, I'm now going to log out from my integration admin user, and then I'm going to go and reload the user interface and instead log in as my user. So now I'm logged in as my user. You'll notice that I can still see everything on the cluster because I gave the user permission to view everything on the cluster. But if I go over here, you'll see that I can only view a lot of the resources. I can edit this one, and I can edit this one because it's an integration dashboard and I gave permission to administrate all of those. If I scroll down further, you'll find a couple of queue managers. And if I click on AG1, the queue managers I gave web admin access to, you'll see that the MQ console loads and I'm able to go in and manage that queue manager. If I try to log into the quick start queue manager, you'll see that I get access denied because I don't have permissions to edit that one. You'll also notice that this is only able to view because I gave web admin permissions. I didn't give access to edit the queue manager deployment itself. I only gave admin access to look at it in the web console. So now that we've added some local users, we can go back into the admin control system and look at how to add external identities to the system. First, I'm going to need to log out of my limited user because they don't have access to use the access control system. And log back in as my integration admin. And now go back into my access control system. To use external identities with Cloud Pak for integration, you either import users into Keycloak by federating an LDAP server, or configure an OIDC or SAML identity provider which will create Keycloak users when the user first logs in. The LDAP configuration is found in User Federation. Keycloak includes defaults for many LDAP vendors, or you can configure everything manually. For OIDC or SAML configuration, use the Identity Providers option. You can configure OIDC or SAML manually, or select a social provider. The OAuth v2 provider includes mappings for standard OAuth claims. And you can use the OpenShift v4 provider to enable your OpenShift users to access Cloud Pak for integration using the same credentials as they use to access OpenShift. That's it for the quick overview. In future videos, we will cover each external identity provider in more detail to help you integrate Cloud Pak for integration with your enterprise identity management system. Thanks for watching, and please reach out on the IBM community with any questions.